Independent Taxpayer. Oversight Committee meeting. I'd like to thank staff for pulling this together, and a special welcome to anyone who might be on the phone or took time to join us on the web. So first point of order, a quick question for the clerk. Do we have a quorum today, Kimberly?
Yes, Chair Kinney, we do have a quorum.
That is good news. Thank you, Kimberly. Second point of order, I'd like to check with the interpreter. If you could introduce yourself, sir, and walk us through any additional procedures we have to adhere to make your job a success. We'd like to hear it. Carlos?
Thank you very much, Chair. As the Chair just indicated, we do have simultaneous interpretation available. To use the feature, in the event that there are any Spanish speakers, please scroll down to the bottom of the Zoom screen where your meeting controls are, then click on the interpretation icon. It looks like a little world, and then select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, the 3 dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish flow in the background. I will now repeat this message in Spanish. Muy buenos días. Se va a contar con servicio de interpretación simultánea. Para hacer uso del mismo, por favor desplácese a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom donde aparecen sus controles, haga clic en el icono de interpretación, parece un globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish o español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom en celular, tableta, etc., presione primero los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Por último, si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio o silenciar audio original. Gracias, and thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you, Carlos. Are you working with another interpreter today? If we have to give you an hour break, just let us know, and we'll make sure to put that on the schedule. All right, so the third point of order is for the liaison to the committee to go over the access requirements for getting to the meeting through the web. So Julie, if you could just run over those guidelines for us.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Kenny. So I just wanted to follow up that I think that Carlos is the only interpreter we'll have today. So we won't have a secondary interpreter. The members will be using the cameras or using their cameras, and we will take the public comments. Members are asked to turn on their cameras when they have a comment or question, and then Chair Kenny will recognize you. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailing comments to the public, you may also provide live comments during today's meeting. In order to provide live comments, you can join today's Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the numbers from your phone that are provided on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. Join the meeting by clicking on the Join Webinar link provided in the confirmation email you'll receive upon registering. When public comments are called for on an item, on the Zoom platform, click on the raise hand icon in the Zoom toolbar on the right of the screen. The chair will call on you by the name you provided. If you're participating by telephone, press *9. The chair will call on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. The instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of SANDAG's website at www.sandag.org. And all comments, whether they're emailed or live, will be made part of today's meeting record. So thank you, and back to Chair Kenny.
All right, Julie, thank you very much. So we'll go ahead and move on to our agenda. Item number 1 is public comment. This would be for members of the public who wish to comment on anything that's not on the agenda. Do we have any members from the public who would like to speak?
There are no public comments, Chair Kinney.
Thank you very much. This is also an opportunity for committee members to speak on items that aren't on the agenda. And get started with our report. Are there any members of the committee that like to make some comments? Just checks. Seeing no hands, we will go ahead and move on from item number 1 to item number 2, which is a report on the TransNet major corridors and the draft 2021 regional plan presentation by Mr. Major and colleagues. Ray, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Chair Kenny.
Director, how are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, honorable members of Independent Tax Oversight Committee. Good morning to all of you, and it's good to be with you. And thank you for participating in today's special meeting where we're going to discuss the past, the present, and the future funding of TransNet to transportation projects. The taxpayers of this region rely on your expertise and your passion for public service. Together as a committee, you'll help guide the region in understanding where we have been and where we're going. And as I told you from day one, we are planning to have an honest, maybe difficult discussion with you, because at the end of the day, you deserve to know, because the public trusts you in making sure that you assure them that the money spent are spent right. In the past, Sandag always been enamored with, let us do this project versus that project. Let us do highways versus transit. Let us do transit versus bikeways. We have changed the way we look at this time. We focus on a system approach. I spoke to you before about the 5 big moves. The 5 big moves: complete corridors, transit leave, flexible fleet, mobility hubs, and next operating system. All these 5 strategies are a system. They cannot work independently, they work together. That system includes highways, bridges, flexible fleet, transit, land use linkages. All of that is a system. And the focus here is on the system. These 5 big moves are innovative. We told you from the get-go, and you're going to hear from Ray Major and Colleen Clemenson today. This is a data-driven approach. This incorporates future mobility aspects, transportation as a service. In the next operating system, we're talking about state-of-the-art technology that we anticipate will be here in the next 20 years. So a focus on data-driven approaches, a focus on technology will make these 5 strategies the system that this region wants and deserves. I can tell you that your planning director, Colleen Clemenson, your chief economist and chief data analytics, Ray Major, have done over, I don't exaggerate, but in the hundreds of presentations, not only locally, but nationally and statewide. And as recently as yesterday, I was meeting with members of the California Transportation Commissions who listened to the presentation and who told me, I'm glad you guys are doing this in San Diego because the state needs a direction. We're providing the state and the country with this direction. And so when it comes to TransNet, we're absolutely clear from day one that we want to be accountable, we want to be credible, and we want to make sure that promises made, promises kept. But let us be frank in this discussion. The 1987 TransNet 1, that's almost 40 years ago. You would agree with me, things were different back then from now. You would agree that some of the things we thought, this is when we, the Apple phone was just talked about. Things change. But more importantly, let us talk about TransNet. I don't know what you were told before. But the bottom line is TransNet is not going to generate the money that most people thought it's going to generate. The $14 billion that you were told about, is really about 9 billion. But let me tell you that right now, between the project, the money that's spent and between the money that's committed, there is no capacity in TransNet. Let me further tell you that between now and 2025, there is not a penny available that's not programmed in TransNet. And between 25 and 35, there is actually less than a few $100 million. And between now and 2048, when TransNet, the end year of TransNet, a total, if you go to the next slide, Colleen, a total of $4.89 billion in expenditure year dollars. That's all TransNet is going to generate between now and 2048. And I'm talking about, I'm talking about major corridors now. Out of that 4.89 billion, 3.33 billion are debt services for previous and ongoing projects. So the only remaining available in expenditure year dollar between now and 2048 is 1.56 billion. That's expenditure year dollars. That's less than $700 million of today's dollars. That's all. So when somebody comes and said, well, you promised me this. Well, if you could do the mission viaduct, or if you could build the 67 and you could build the 78 with $700 million, let's do it. That's if you prove to me that this is the right strategy, which it is not. But the bottom line is, even if we wanted to do it, we have no funding to do it with. So please pay attention to this chart. This chart says between now and 2048, in almost 30 years, there is only $1.56 billion in expenditure year dollars, which is less than $700 million in today's dollars. Things changed. I want Sandag to be credible. I want Sandag to be accountable. I want Sandag to keep its promises, but I want also Sandag to do the best for this region. And the best for this region is the reimagining of the future transportation that our staff is going to talk about. I ask you, and I appreciate you asking the tough questions, but also let us be very frank and very honest about the discussion. From day one, I told the board of directors that TransNet has no money to do many of the projects that we thought we were going to do. And furthermore, I think many of these projects are just isolated projects that does not lead to a great system. The 5 big moves that you have today on the street are a system that San Diegans will appreciate. And you as a committee that's been trusted by the public to have an oversight, have an obligation to have these talking points. And look, some people go on TV and said, well, you know, Sandag is gonna spy on me and Sandag is gonna spy on us and Sandag is not fulfilling their promises. Look at the numbers. Look at the numbers, but also look at the 5 big moves and look at what kind of reimagining future transportation is going to happen in San Diego County. So Chair Kenny, members of the Oversight Committee, thank you for allowing to be here. I'm going to introduce right now, I call her the best planning director in the country, Colleen Clemenson. The best chief economist in the country and chief analytic in the country is Ray Major. And I'm going to be here for us to have a debate and answer your questions. So with that, Colleen Clemenson.
Thank you, Hassan. And thank you again, ITALK members. We thought it'd be really helpful to just start out with the ballot language that was in the TransNet extension ordinance. And it's about relieving congestion, improving safety, and to match the local funds with state and federal funds. And, you know, and I think this is really building out what Hassan is talking about. Things have changed so much. Our focus back at the time that this went before the voters was really about traffic congestion and trying to figure out how to move individual vehicles as quickly as possible. When you look at the corridors that we're talking about here, I-5, I-8, SR 52, I-15, we have done a lot. We have completed a whole lot of projects, and maybe some of you have had a chance to look at our TransNet story map. More than 650 projects have been completed, and this is a combination of highway improvements, transit improvements, our environmental mitigation program, active transportation projects, and grants to our local jurisdictions for smart growth and for active transportation, as well as services for seniors and disabled persons. So 650 projects just since the TransNet measure was approved. As you all know, the TransNet funds there's many elements to it. And today we are going to focus on the major corridor capital projects and share with you how what's in the TransNet ordinance compares to what we're actually proposing in the 2021 regional plan. And as Hassan mentioned, we're really talking about a transformational system approach to the region's transportation challenges, as opposed to a set of projects. And this is largely because things have changed dramatically in the region. Ray Major is going to share with you some of the trends in land use and how population projections and our revenues are some of the major changes. But first, I'm going to ask Michelle Smith, who is one of our stars in our TransNet programming unit, to go through and share with you all the projects that have been completed and those that are underway.
Thank you, Colleen. As Colleen mentioned, my name is Michelle Smith, and I'm a Senior Project Controls Analyst here at SANDAG. And I'm going to review the projects that we have completed utilizing the TransNet extension funds, as well as those that are currently in progress. As Colleen also discussed, the following projects will be focused on the major corridor program. So I would like to share with ITALC what projects have been completed so far. This list provides those projects that are open to traffic or users and their corresponding ordinance numbers from the TransNet extension ordinance. This chart can be found on page 2 of your report or page 5 of the PDF. These projects were able to be completed early due to the development of the Early Action Program, which consists of projects along routes 5, 15, 52, 76, 805, and the Mid-Coast Light Rail project. These projects were given high priority and TransNet funds were advanced in order for the projects to be completed earlier and at a lower cost. The following slides will provide further information on some of these projects. The I-15 Express Lanes provides 20 miles of flexible travel between State Route 78 in Escondido and State Route 163 to ease congestion and keep travel times reliable. High occupancy vehicles like carpools and van pools can use the express lanes for free, all day, every day. Transit services like the Rapid, permitted clean air vehicles, and motorcyclists can also use these lanes for free. The I-15 Express Lanes have been nationally recognized for their innovative designs. They are the first section of the regional system of interconnected express lanes, and their highlights include 5 direct access ramps, or DARs, and other 16 access points that give travelers a wide range of options of where to enter or exit the lane so they can easily reach their destinations. New and improved transit stations are located near the DARs to support improved public transit options. And the barrier in the middle of the express lanes is moved Monday through Thursday mornings, so 3 southbound lanes provide congestion relief for rush hour commuters. The Rapid Network, which was launched in 2014, is a great example of collaboration throughout the region. These services around the county provide high-frequency limited stop service along the various bus routes. One of the most successful are the rapid routes along I-15, have taken many commuters off the road and onto transit. Rapid is an integral part of the region-wide strategy to create a network of quick and efficient public transit choices. We have received several testimonials on how this service has saved people time, money, and their sanity by not having to drive to work every day. We currently have rapid service to downtown along the I-15, which includes the Rapid Express, providing weekday peak hour morning and evening services between Escondido Transit Center and downtown. In Mid-City, which runs between San Diego State University and downtown along El Cajon and Park Boulevards. and South Bay, which provides service from Otay Mesa Port of Entry to downtown via Chula Vista, and of course in University City called the Super Loop. The first stage of the I-805 HOV North Lanes project consists of 2 carpool lanes, one in each direction between SR 52 and Mira Mesa Boulevard, along with a direct access ramp at Carroll Canyon Road. These facilities help ease congestion and improve traffic flow, and the DAR expedites access on and off the freeway. These facilities provide new transportation choices for people who live, work, and play in the Golden Triangle area, which is also a leading employment center in San Diego County. This picture is of the 52 extension, which was completed in 2011. Some of the great things that resulted in this project include reduced congestion on I-8, Mission Gorge Road, Mass Boulevard, and Prospect Avenue. Reduced congestion on I-8 as much as 20%, direct access to job centers from East County communities, improved mobility by increasing roadway capacity, and travel time has been reduced by approximately 10 minutes. 3 projects along SR 76 corridor have improved travel times for commuters in North County. The west segment was completed in 1999, and the middle segment, completed in 2012, reconstructed the 2-lane highway between Melrose Drive and Mission Road into 4 lanes. The east segment, completed in 2017, widened SR 76 to a 4-lane highway between Mission Road and I-15, improved the SR 76 I-15 interchange, and upgraded the park and ride at Old Highway 395. These projects along 76 corridor included physical improvements such as widening the roadway, expanding the park and ride improvements to existing on-off ramps to improve traffic operations and efficiencies. Safety enhancements, which included creating a median barrier, realigning the curves, and widening the shoulders. Environmental benefits of these projects included facilitating wildlife movements through animal undercrossings, mitigating stormwater runoff, restoring and revegetating habitat areas. After more than 30 years of successful operation, the San Diego Trolley completed a sweeping overhaul of the blue and orange line trolley systems. With the $660 million project complete, passengers and freight carriers enjoyed more efficient and reliable services. The project included raising platforms, replacing old rail and overhead wires, retrofit replacement of traction power stations, and improving switching, signaling, and crossovers. New low-floor trolleys and new station amenities were all part of the project to upgrade the old system. To accommodate faster boarding, 65 low-floor cars replaced the older vehicles. Platforms at 35 stations were raised, which enables all passengers, including parents with strollers, bicycles, and wheelchair users, to get on and off more easily. Passengers now enjoy nearly level boarding rather than having to use stairs or mechanical lift. Upgrades to the trolley stations included the installation of larger shelters that provide more protection from sun and rain, and new furnishings such as benches and trash receptacles. Platforms have decorative paving and are now equipped with the next arrival signs. This renewal of the track provided easier access, quicker trips, and an enhanced experience for the nearly 27 million riders served by the orange and blue lines. The Environmental Mitigation Program, or EMP, provides funds through TransNet to protect, preserve, and restore native habitats as offsets to disturbances caused by construction of regional and local transportation projects. Over the past decade, the $850 million program has helped acquire and or restore more than 8,700 acres around the region with a total value of $150 million, in part by leveraging $27 million from conservative partners. Some of the recent acquisitions go above and beyond required environmental mitigation and are made possible through savings achieved by buying land early at lower prices and in larger parcels. The TransNet EMP goes beyond traditional mitigation programs, buying large parcels of land early at lower prices to comprehensively satisfy the mitigation requirements of current future projects. In addition to the early acquisition of land, The EMP provides funds for regional management and monitoring to maintain the biological value of conserved habitat lands. The EMP program has further information on the Keep San Diego Moving website, as well as their EMP story map. So it is exciting to see how much that we have completed in such a small amount of time. So now that we have reviewed some of the completed projects that the TransNet Extension Ordinance has done, I would like to discuss those projects that are currently in progress. This list provides those projects currently in project, which includes phases all the way from environmental to construction. And this table can also be found on page 2 of your report and page 5 of your PDF. The following slides will provide more information on the projects included in this listing. So the first project is, of course, the Midcoast project, which you may have heard of. We are very excited to see this project opening at the end of the year so that trolley riders will be able to ride the trolley from the border to UCSD and anywhere in between. This picture you see here is a picture of the aerial tramway with the elevated station and tracks. This picture, a little bit more south along the I-5, shows the progress at Noble Drive trolley station along with the parking structure. On a quarterly basis, staff brings updates for the Midcoast project to the Transportation Committee and the ITAC. These presentations provide an update on the construction, schedule, and budget, and provides great pictures like this one. Build NCC includes the restoration of the San Elijo Lagoon. The restoration project is being made possible by the TransNet EMP, or Environmental Mitigation Program, that I spoke about earlier, coordinated with the San Elijo Lagoon Conservancy and resource agencies. Restoration will enhance the lagoon's wetland, upland areas, improve tidal flushing, and includes beach and sand replenishment. Improving coastal access is a critical component of the NCC program. Build NCC will include new east, west, and north-south bicycle and pedestrian trails in and around San Elijo Lagoon. Caltrans and Sandag are extending an HOV lane on I-5, one in each direction, from Loma Santa Fe to Solana Beach, to State Route 78 in Oceanside. Additional highway improvements include replacing and lengthening the San Elijo Lagoon Highway Bridge to accommodate the HOV lanes and help lagoon tidal flow, building several sound walls, constructing a new park and ride multi-use facility, and the I-5 Manchester Avenue interchange, including auxiliary lanes. The park and ride multi-use facility will provide parking for carpools, bike racks, electric vehicle charging stations, and recreational access to the San Elijo Lagoon and the new North Coast Bike Trail. This picture shows the progress of work near Leucadia Boulevard along northbound I-5. So some projects within the North Coast corridor have already been completed. This includes the I-5 Genesee interchange and the widening project. As shown in the first picture above, this project replaced the existing 6-lane Genesee overpass with a 10-lane structure that is able to accommodate current and future traffic demands. Along with the replacement of the overcrossing, the project widened the freeway access ramps, added an auxiliary lane in northbound direction on I-5 between Genesee Avenue and Roselle Street, and constructed a new separated bike ped path. The second picture is of the Gilman Bridge over the I-5. In partnership with Caltrans and UCSD, this bridge connects Gilman Drive to Medical Center Drive, providing a vital link between the west and east campuses of UCSD. On a quarterly basis, staff brings updates to the I-5 North Coast corridor to the ITAC, and these presentations also provide update on construction, schedule, and budget, and provides great pictures as well as update statuses of the current project. The Los Angeles, San Diego, San Luis Obispo Rail Corridor, or referred to as a LoSAN corridor, is the 60-mile segment of passenger rail in San Diego County, stretching from the Orange County line south to the city of San Diego's Santa Fe Depot. The segment passes over 6 coastal lagoons, Camp Pendleton, and goes through the cities of Oceanside, Carlsbad, Encinitas, Solana Beach, and Del Mar before coming to its final destination in downtown San Diego. As of March 2021, approximately 45 miles or 75% of the corridor is double tracked and in service, with 7 miles of double tracking either in design, environmental, or construction. This slide shows a snapshot of the LoSAN story map, which shows those projects that are complete or are in various stages of development. Each year, more than 2.8 million intercity passengers and 4.4 million commuter rail passengers travel the LoSAN corridor. In addition to travel to double tracking along the corridor, other infrastructure improvements include bridge and track replacements, new platforms, pedestrian undercrossings, and other safety and operational enhancements. As a companion to the I-5 freeway, the San Diego segment of the LoSAN corridor plays a critical role in the movement of goods and people within region's North Coast corridor. The State Route SR11, or Otay Mesa Port of Entry project, is a joint venture between SANDAG and Caltrans in collaboration with state and federal partners in the US and Mexico to create a 21st century border crossing for the San Diego, Baja California region, which will enhance regional mobility and fuel economic growth and binational trade. The new port of entry will be clean, green, and smart. This project is anticipated to reduce vehicle wait times by approximately 50% and reduce greenhouse gas emissions that will improve air quality in the border region. These improvements will provide a direct connection to the new port of entry, helping to enable fast, predictable, and secure border crossings. A new port of entry at Otay Mesa will improve regional security and safety, bolster the binational economy, improve mobility and efficiency, and foster innovative technology solutions, all while delivering a 10-to-1 return on investment in the San Diego region. Through managed lanes operations and complete corridor integrations, the new port of entry will be essential for a fully integrated regional transportation system. As you can see on this slide, several projects included in the Border Access Improvements Program of projects. A segment of SR11 along with the northbound connectors were completed in 2016. Construction is currently underway for the final segment of SR11, the future toll road, and the SR 125-11-905 southbound connector ramps, which are part of the overall SR11 Otay Mesa Port of Entry project. As you can see, SANDAG has utilized the TransNet extension funds to enhance travel within San Diego County and prepare for what the future might hold. And now I will hand the presentation over to Ray. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. 650 projects completed under TransNet. I think that that's actually really amazing. And when you think about the highlights that she went over, we've done a tremendous amount in this region. And as you can see, a lot of them were capacity adding type of projects. And the reason for this is that when we looked at our transportation network 20 years ago, one of the things that we were judged on from the state of California was something called level of service. And level of service had to do with how fast or how much congestion there was on the freeways. And our job was to mitigate that. And the easiest way to do that is to widen freeways. And that's what you saw a lot of what was happening in the last 20 years. We've learned a tremendous amount. We've learned what works and we've learned what doesn't work. We learned a lot from the managed lanes, for instance, and how to be able to have dynamic charging for them and be able to really optimize traffic flow. We've learned what works in terms of rapid buses, for instance. We have some very successful routes like the Superloop and going from Escondido to downtown. And we've learned what works in terms of rail too, like for instance, the Blue Line, which is such a critical connection all the way down to the border. But when we take a look back at what 2002 looked like, okay, this is back when the TransNet 2 extension was really being worked on. I just want to kind of put us in that mindset of what the people were looking at when they saw this. And the reason I'm doing this is that right now, you know, we're predicting out to 2050 what's going to happen. But a lot of times I wonder, what did my predecessors think about what the world was going to be like in 2002? Well, cell phone technology at the time was 2G. It was a wonderful thing. You'd be driving, you don't want to talk to somebody, and you'd say, hey, I'm entering a dead zone. And then, you know, the phone would give out. And so we had the beginnings of a cell phone network, nothing that could be like the 5G that we're envisioning now, where you could actually have autonomous vehicles talking to each other. Vehicles were completely different. We had electric vehicles weren't even something that we were really thinking about. Computers were really the, you know, IBM AT, XT, that type of thing. Telephones like the smartphone hadn't even existed yet. You went on a trip, you used Thomas Brothers map. And if you wanted to
have what we now would consider a flexible fleet, you needed to call a taxi. So that, this is the world that as it was in 2002, and we're building a transportation system with this type of technology in mind. But think about the revolution in these different areas, and think about what the future holds for things like cell phone technology and for autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, those type of things, flexible fleets, and how that fundamentally changes the plan that we can come up with in terms of transportation. What I want to show you, though, is what my predecessors were looking at when they were looking at things like land use. Okay, there are a couple of things that changed significantly during this forecast period, and I'm going to walk you through a couple of them. The first one is land use. This is the Series 9 regional plan forecast. So this is what we believed the land use would look like in 2020. So this is pre-TransNet 2. This is when TransNet 1 was still being used. You see that there's a lot of areas where we could build. Those are the white areas on this map. You see that there's a tremendous amount of growth, or there was we believe that there was going to be a lot of growth in areas like Warner Springs, a lot of people living there. And you see out by Jacumba, for instance. So the population would have been spread everywhere. And so this is the future that planners in 2002 were looking at when they were putting together this plan. Series 10 is the actual land use forecast that was used when the TransNet ordinance or extension was passed. And as you can see, there's more green open space here. So the perception of protecting the backcountry had started to take hold. We have more places where we were going to protect, but you also see that there's still a lot of growth in areas like Warner Springs, Jacumba. You see the Poway is that big purple area on the map, and you see that there's still a relatively spread out land use pattern. And this land use is what we believed would happen by 2030. So not all the forecasts back then went out to 2050. Series 12 was the next forecast, and this is what we used during the Great Recession. Again, you still see a lot of growth out in the Warner Springs area in Jacumba. And then Series 13, which I have up on the map now, is the map. This is what we used for the 2015 plan, which we have currently, it's the currently adopted plan, and it's the one that's being updated with the 2021 plan. And the important thing to note here is look at the growth that we believed was going to happen along the 8 corridor, and look at the growth that we believe was going to happen in the area that would be represented by where Ramona is, so a little bit north. And you can see that it's still kind of spread out, and there's still pockets of growth out in the East County. Series 14, which is the land use forecast that we used for 2021, looks completely different. And the reason that it's important to understand this is that we take the land use from each one of the jurisdictions within San Diego. We work with the planning departments. We take the land use that they're proposing, and then we aggregate all of that. And that's the beginning of what our forecast uses in order to figure out where people are going to be and live. But these two maps compare Series 10, which is when we did TransNet 2, to Series 14, which is the one that we're looking at for the future. What you see is that there's very little growth in the East County in the Series 14 map, and you see that much more of the growth is concentrated in the existing areas. The important thing here is that a transportation plan that was conceived 20 years ago in terms of what would have been the right projects probably isn't the right set of projects if you look at the map on the right and you look at where we now believe growth is going to be. There's two completely different land use patterns requiring two completely different solutions to transportation. There are some other things that we need to take a look at too. Back in 2002, when we originally did this, the TransNet extension, we believed that we would have probably around 4.45, about 4.5 million people in the region by 2050. And this is an extrapolation from the forecast because it only went out to 2030, but using the same algorithms that they used, we'd have about a 4.5 million population. Well, our population growth isn't as fast as we thought it was. And now from the 2020 perspective, looking forward, we're looking at a population of more like 3.74 million people here in the region. So when you lose 700,000 people out of the region, again, you need a completely different transportation system because not only do we have fewer people living in the region, we have fewer jobs in the region, represented by this graph. You see about 2.08 million jobs versus 2.2 million jobs. And we need fewer housing units to house those people. So the region is not growing as fast as it was in the 2000 forecast, and it's not spreading out as far geographically as it was. So these are the forecasts now that have been updated. I just wanted to share those with you so you can see that for planning purposes, we're really planning for it's a completely different region. And then, as Hassan mentioned, our annual TransNet revenue. The forecast that was done in 2002 was used for the measure that was passed in 2004 and implemented in 2008. And what I just want to point out is that for those first couple of years, that 2002 forecast was very accurate. It was basically right on. And so I think that, economists and everyone else here at Sandag at that time felt pretty confident that this forecast was reasonable. And you see that they had a total of $14 billion being expected from this half-cent extension. But remember, this is based upon a much larger population. It's based upon more housing units and more jobs in the region. And so that's what they were looking at when they did this forecast. You see, we went into the Great Recession, and you see that revenues dropped. Now, the important thing here is that this is measured in 2002 dollars. So everything is comparable to the year when the forecast was done. And the reason I want to show you that is that in real dollar terms, take a look at the orange bars. The TransNet forecast has about as much buying power in 2020 as it did in 2002. So we are really not gaining anything in terms of buying power. We're still at about $200 million in real dollar terms. And this is very important because the expectation was that as the region grew, we would be collecting more revenue and we'd have more money to spend on these projects. Our newest forecast for TransNet, we're looking at about $8.7 billion in revenue by 2048. And this is again in 2002 dollars. And this is based on a population of around 3.6 million people here in the region. So significantly less money to spend or borrow against. And the graph that Hassan showed you at the very beginning shows that we've essentially tapped out this source of funds. We've borrowed against it as much as we can. We've brought forward projects. We've borrowed money at extremely low interest rates for things like the Mid-Coast, and we've built those out. But there really is no additional monies left here to continue to build from. This graph is the last one that I'm going to show you, and this is just the cumulative revenue from year to year. And I just want to show you what it looks like, and you can see the trajectory is much lower with the new forecast than it was with the old forecast. And again, a lot of this has to do with population. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Colleen to talk about the future.
All right, thank you. So we've shared with you what we've accomplished with TransNet. We've shared with you what has dramatically changed. And I know you've all seen this triangle before, but this I think really gets to the heart of what we're talking about in terms of the change. When it comes to developing our regional transportation system, we absolutely have to address congestion, and that's what TransNet has been all about. But part of the puzzle that we also have to solve for is addressing social equity in a very meaningful way, and also meeting our state and federal mandates, and many of those are new. This is all about addressing climate change and clean air. And when we dig a little bit deeper into those state and federal mandates, I really want to point out how revolutionary Senate Bill 375 is, and how revolutionary Senate Bill 743, which addresses the California Environmental Quality Act, are, and how these two substantially change how we think about transportation. So Senate Bill 375 requires regions and metropolitan planning organizations like Sandag to put together a plan that shows how through land use changes and transportation improvements, we can reduce the per person vehicle miles traveled and overall reduce greenhouse gas emissions per person. So this is a big change where in the past, what we were looking at is how do we just simply address for congestion, and not necessarily if that congestion resulted in people driving further or more people using the roadways. The big game changer is Senate Bill 743. And what this changed in the California Environmental Quality Act, otherwise known as CEQA, I think you all know CEQA, instead of looking at level of service on a roadway, so if the level of service, if there's a lot of congestion, the level of service is really poor, and there you get a grade rating on that, A through F. And if you have a grade rating of D or F, the requirement in CEQA used to be, how do you mitigate for that? Well, you would widen a roadway. What's different now, instead of looking at that level of service or that grade for level of service, the measurement is now about vehicle miles traveled, and otherwise known as VMT. So by widening roadways, we actually increase vehicle miles traveled. And under the California Environmental Quality Act now, if you're increasing vehicle miles traveled, you have to mitigate for that and show ways that you're reducing vehicle miles traveled. And really the only way to do that is ensure that people are making shorter trips. So maybe they're living closer to their destinations, or they are carpooling, ride sharing, using alternative forms of transportation. And so these laws have substantially changed how we think about transportation. Michelle went through the projects that we've completed and that are underway in the Major Corridor Program. This is a list of the projects that are future. And when you look through these, many of these are roadway expansion projects, which under the new laws, we really can't do any longer. So what we have included in the 2021 regional plan is an overall integrated system approach to addressing our transportation challenges. And the very, very first thing is to start with land use. And Ray shared with you how our land use has changed over time. And that's largely been due to the city of San Diego and other urban cities changing their land use to allow for more infill development. And while at the same time, the county of San Diego has looked at really consolidating development in our rural communities, in the unincorporated areas, and really allowing for more open space preservation. So what I'm showing you here in this, and I'm going to show this kind of layered approach, how important it is to bring together land use and transportation. What I'm showing on this diagram right now are the mobility hub areas. These are the areas of existing higher density within the San Diego region, and where our local jurisdictions are planning for that higher density, and where SANDAG as a regional agency believes this is where we should be focusing our growth and development to maximize opportunities to reduce vehicle miles traveled and provide more travel options. It's within these areas also that high quality transportation transit options become available. This next layer shows improvements to local and express bus service. And this is the kind of service that is available within these urbanized areas and also can connect with areas to bring people in to the more central locations. The next layer, this is the complete corridors. This is really looking at that existing infrastructure, our existing highway network, and incorporating managed lanes like we see on Interstate 15, and Ray talked about this. We have so many great examples of projects that we have done in the San Diego region that then we can spread throughout the system. And so really applying the managed lane system throughout the highway corridors and doing that within the existing right-of-way. So repurposing shoulders, repurposing some of the existing lanes to allow for the managed lanes that can support high-speed transit, that can support goods movement, and then applying technology so that we're really maximizing the use of these facilities. Next is the next generation rapid. And this is the higher speed transit service that's given priority, whether it's on the managed lanes or on our larger roadways within local jurisdictions, and really thinking about separated lanes for this transit and priority given with signals so that transit is truly moving faster than if you were driving in your own car. The next kind of layer of the system is our light rail. And so this is the Sprinter and the trolley. And the regional plan envisions more separating the light rail from vehicular traffic. So we call those grade separations. I know as ITALK members, you're very familiar with what we talk about as in terms of a grade separation, giving signal priority. And then the big new concept here is about a high-speed commuter rail system like we see in Los Angeles, Seattle, and other major metro areas. And the goal here with the higher speed commuter rail system is to take people from the larger population centers and getting them to major destinations or employment centers. This is the system that makes the most sense for the places where people are making the most trips that could be consolidated into a higher speed transit system. When you put all this together, we end up with 10,000 connections, 10,000 connections being made. And what this really facilitates are true travel options for the residents of the region. It addresses congestion because we have travel options that people can utilize. And it really helps us with social equity because it provides a viable transit option from some of our most vulnerable communities to get to higher education, to get to higher paying jobs, and also quality healthcare. And this is what this integrated system really allows. I'm going to go through each of our major corridors, and this isn't really an apples to apples comparison, but just to give you a sense of what's in the TransNet ordinance and how this has been re-envisioned in the regional plan. So we'll just start, and this is all attachment 1 in the staff report. So I'm going to go through this quickly, and we're happy to come back and answer any specific questions. But if you just start with the I-5 South corridor, what we had in TransNet was adding HOV lanes or carpool lanes up I-5 with the purpose of moving people as quickly as possible along Interstate 5, and also double tracking the coaster to really speed that up, the coaster in the low sand corridor. When you look at the integrated approach in the regional plan, we're looking at managed lanes on I-5 and doing this within the existing right-of-way. So again, repurposing the shoulder, repurposing some of the lanes so that we're not expanding the roadway, but making more efficient use of what we have. And then within that, also adding in rapid bus service, adding in this commuter rail that goes from the border into downtown San Diego and then hits our major job centers in Kearny Mesa and in Sorrento Mesa, making a direct connection to the airport. And you see here too, these mobility hubs, those are the purple areas. It's really serving the workers and the people in these purple areas that is so critical. When we go a little bit further, then we can look at the active transportation network. This really helps to facilitate what we call the flexible fleets, as well as people biking and walking, and a fully integrated kind of layered system depending upon the type of trip that someone is going to make. When we look at the I-5 North coast corridor, so again, the TransNet ordinance laid out managed lanes on the northern part of Interstate 5. Some of that is already under construction today. The double tracking on the coaster. And as you look at what we have proposed in the regional plan, it's applying the managed lanes, actually adding managed lanes to I-5. Right now, we're working on the HOV lanes in the North Coast Corridor project. So turning those into managed lanes and adding another managed lane. So we have that fully connected system of managed lanes. Again, the improvements along the coaster, which deal with the Del Mar Tunnel and getting rid of that big, Miramar curve that slows down the coaster travel time. And then again, adding in the bikeways and the rapid bus service, parallel service, so that we have lots of options for people and serving all of these mobility hubs. The I-8 corridor, we just had 2 general purpose lanes in this little part of Interstate 8. And granted, this is just what's in the TransNet ordinance, but looking at Interstate 8, same thing. Managed lanes, 2 managed lanes in each direction on Interstate 8. Then looking at the mobility hubs. These are major centers in our community that Interstate 8 goes through, from El Cajon, and then all the way to Mission Valley, and then on into downtown San Diego. And so managed lanes, adding in, again, commuter rail that goes from El Cajon all the way into downtown San Diego, parallel improvements on the light rail, as well as next generation rapid in this corridor. This is one of the most heavily traveled corridors in the entire region, and therefore requires really a system approach. And again, a whole bunch of active transportation bikeway improvements that also facilitate bikes, peds, and our flexible fleets. I-805 corridor. So this, again, in the TransNet ordinance, we're looking at carpool lanes up and down 805, as well as a rapid bus service that runs partially on 805, as well as Interstate 15 and crosses back to the west on SR 52. What do we have in the regional plan? So again, it's looking at 2 managed lanes in each direction on 805 within that existing corridor. Look at all the mobility hubs. These are the dense population centers as well as the employment centers. A new high-speed commuter rail system here that connects from the cross-border terminal east of San Ysidro, connects into San Ysidro, and then again up to hit major employment population centers and our major employment centers in Kearney Mesa and Sereno Valley. Also adding a significant number of active transportation bikeway projects, as well as rapid bus services. I-15, the I-15 corridor, again, great example of managed lanes that we're looking to apply throughout the region, as well as a rapid bus. This is what was in TransNet. And then as we look at how this is envisioned in the regional plan, is again, taking that whole managed lane concept up and down State Route 15 and I-15, looking at where the mobility hubs are, running the next generation rapid here, all the east-west bikeway connections as well. And then let's look at State Route 52, where we are looking at 1 new lane in each direction on State Route 52 in the TransNet ordinance. And here in the regional plan, we're looking at 3 managed lanes. So then, as Michelle had talked about in some of our other projects, where given the flow of traffic, we would have a movable barrier. So you'd have in the morning 2 directional, you'd have 2 lanes, managed lanes that would be going to the west. And in the evening, you would shift that barrier and allow those 2 lanes to be available going to the east. Also running a number of next generation rapid services on the corridors nearby, as well as major investments in the active transportation system. State Route 56 in TransNet, we had talked about 1 new lane in each direction. And here, looking at, again, managed lanes on State Route 56. And if I'm not mistaken, I might holler out to you, Phil, isn't it, we end up with a similar situation of 2 managed lanes with a 3rd one and a movable barrier? Is that right? Yeah. 3 total. So 3 total there. And probably one of the more complicated ones are State Route 67 corridor. So what we had in the TransNet ordinance was to add a new lane in each direction on State Route 67. And given the changes in laws, makes it very difficult for us to do that. So what we are proposing on State Route 67 are a number of improvements to help address safety. So where we have really tight curves, doing some straightening in those locations. Also widening shoulders, so there are safer places, safer people to pull off the road, providing true evacuation routes, and then technology in terms of signal timing so that we can prioritize traffic flow at certain times of the day. So with that, I'm going to wrap up with the State Route 78 corridor. So what had been envisioned in the TransNet ordinance was 1 managed lane in each direction on the 78, a rapid bus along Palomar Airport Road, and then some station improvements along the Sprinter. And when you look at what we have in the regional plan, it's actually 2 managed lanes in each direction on State Route 78. looking at the population and employment centers that are being served and including flexible fleets in those areas, as well as the next generation rapid, not only on Palomar Airport Road, but several others that are connecting from the university and in through Vista and San Marcos. A number of bikeways, active transportation projects also here. So really layering all the different transportation improvements into an overall system. And then on State Route 94 and State Route 125 corridor, we had identified HOV lanes in the TransNet ordinance, some general purpose lanes on State Route 94. And then what we have in the plan includes 3 managed lanes on 94. So really doing the kind of movable barrier as we talked about. State Route 125, 2 managed lanes. So repurposing that into managed lanes. The direct access ramps that I think are missing there today that are so important. And then intersection improvements all around along the rural part of State Route 94 and many of the safety improvements and technology improvements that I mentioned for State Route 67. And of course, really serving the mobility hubs in this area and a number of improvements for active transportation. So I hope this has provided the picture for you of an overall integrated system that brings together land use and really scaled type of transportation to help us with all different kinds of trips in the region, whether they're short trips, long trips. This is really the system that helps us get around. So in terms of our timeline, our public comment period, we've extended through August 6th. Later this summer, we will release the draft EIR, and this fall, we will be asking the Sandag Board of Directors to adopt the plan and certify the environmental impact report. I'm just listing here all the different ways that comments can be provided to the Sandag team, and we really appreciate your time here. And I'm going to turn it back to Hassan to wrap up.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Ray and Michelle. Chair Kenny, honorable members of the Oversight Committee. So you heard from the staff, the system approach. Every single corridor in San Diego County was addressed to achieve the goals of not only congestion and meeting the mandates, but social justice and social equity. Been here about 2.5 years, and when people ask me, say, what's your main job? And I say, with my team, we're going to allow San Diegans to dream the best transportation system in the world. And we hope that our leaders, including yourselves, help San Diegans achieve those dreams and do it in a responsible way, do it in such a way that it's going to yield results. Things changed since 1987. Just give you an example. You probably heard it before. So AT&T in the middle of the 80s hired a very reputable consultant firm and asked them a question. What do you think the use of cell phones is going to be in 2000? And this is a very reputable firm in New York. And they came back and they said, going to be maximum 900,000 will be using cell phones. The actual number in 2000 was 109 million. So it's 120 times wrong. So they said 900,000, we ended up with 109 million. Why did they do that? They didn't do wrong. They look at past data and they interpret. There is disruptive change happening here, and transportation is no difference. I hope that you'll agree that we are not gonna get where we wanna be and be sustainable by just saying, well, let's just add lanes to the freeways. Houston, Texas, built a 26-lane freeway for 4.5 miles. I happened to actually drive that. 26 lanes. And that became one of the most congested in Houston 3 months after it opened. You're not gonna solve any and achieve any of your goals by just saying, let's add to the lane. And to the say, well, you promised me. Well, look, Ray just told you. In 2002, we forecasted 14 billion. Actually, it's 8.9 billion. That's almost 40% less money. Ladies and gentlemen, we have no capacity to build with this TransNet. But even if we did, I would question whether we should continue with the thinking of 1987. The world is different today. So I ask you to have the oversight that you're supposed to have. Ask the tough question. Hold us to the fire. Hold me as your CEO of this agency for every expenditure that we do. But I also want to remind you that this region had very critical things they need to do. We just over 4th of July, we had another, I call it slug, another collapse of the bluff. How many times we're going to repair the bluff? In my 10 years here, this is the 4th time we had to use emergency things to repair it. How many times we're going to complain that it takes a long time to get from North County to the airport? We need to connect to the airport to rail. How many times we're going to say people who ride the Blue Line spend somewhere around an hour, 45 minutes to an hour when the trip should take 15 minutes? How many times we're going to say that, well, we can't do it right because we don't have the money? Or we can't do it right because we don't want to dig in the ground. Help us do it right for the sake of future generations. We inherit the grid system from our parents and grandparents. Let us leave these kids another system. And I tell you, the name of the game for us here at Sandag is accountability. We want to be accountable. We want to mean what we say and say what we mean. We're not going to give you just to feel good, tell you we're going to get $1 zillion when actually we're going to get much less. We're going to tell you credibly and honestly what to expect. And now we're telling you as an oversight committee that these projects, not only they don't have the money to do them, they're not the right project for San Diego. We're telling you that straight out. So I thank you for listening to us. I appreciate you. And now my team and I are ready to answer your questions.
All right, well, Director Ricardo, thank you very much. That was a thorough presentation. Quick point of order. Before we go into questions, Carlos, do we owe you a break? Should be for our interpreter.
Chair Kenny, go ahead and continue. He says he's good to go.
Did Chair Kenny drop off?
Vice Chair, I believe so, if you wanted to continue, ma'am.
Okay. He must have lost connection. Well,
I think we lost him, Sunny.
Okay, so no public comments?
No, Vice Chair, no public comments.
So are there any members of ITALC that would like to comment or have questions? I don't see any hands yet. Pedro?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. One of them, and I mean, first of all, it's really good to see the plan and what's being proposed. And clearly, I think you have a very good case that has been made that the plan that's being proposed is quite different than was in the ordinance that was approved in 2004. Having said that, if we have now a new proposed regional transportation plan that, is moving forward, it seems to me that it's going to be in conflict with the 2004 TransNet ordinance. Does the TransNet ordinance need to be modified to be able to do this? Or what is the timing of this?
And thank you, Mr. Orso. Good to see you as always.
Likewise.
And as a leader in this region who was at Caltrans and cities, you know that, yes, the ordinance was written in such a way and was smartly written that allows the board with 2/3 votes to change the ordinance. And yes, we are going to the board for major change to the ordinance because frankly, we owe it to San Diegans to be upfront about what this ordinance changes are. So the simple answer is absolutely. The board, obviously, the board could go either way, but we're going to go to the board and ask them for the changes so we are consistent with the plan we're proposing.
Thank you. Second question, if I look at what was estimated, the $14 billion versus what's now being proposed, which is the $8.7 billion, it's obvious to me that the $8.7 billion is not going to build this plan. It's going to have to rely on federal, state, and other sources of funding to do that. But having said that, on the projects that were built, we must have an accounting of what those ended up costing versus what was planned, and then what was that difference, and then following that, what's being proposed on the, I guess, the new corridors. I guess what I'm getting at is that we need to have some sort of an end of the 2004 ordinance accounting to clearly know what was what's left, or maybe that's what you're estimating the 8.7 to be. I don't know.
Okay, so that's a great question. So when you start the project, you have estimates of cost, and when you finish the project, you know you have an accounting of what it costs, and the cost went up for sure. There's no question. The 8.7 versus the 14.0 are actually just the forecast. They were a mistake in the forecast.
Okay.
Has nothing to do with the cost, but the cost went up, to your point. And by the way, the cost went up in such a way that if I show you a curve now, it will go like this and then go like this. This is, and I'm not expecting that to go down anytime soon, at least for the foreseeable future. So you have a double whammy. You have a large gap in the forecast, but you also have an added cost. But we do have an accounting of every project. And frankly, the largest project is the mid-coast.
Mhm.
The mid-coast is going to be delivered to MTS to operate in a few months. That mid-cost is 2.1 or 2.2. I don't know, Jim. It is 2.1 or 2.2. But that mid-cost actually came on budget, on schedule. But that doesn't mean the cost didn't go up, Pedro. And the cost will continue to go up. But the reduction in forecast from 14 to 8.7 has nothing to do with the cost. This is just simply, we thought we're going to get more money out of TransNet. To your point about federal and state, and this is, I will take responsibility for that mistake. This is the mistake we always did to make ourselves feel better. We said, well, even 8.7, if we do a good job, we get money from the fed and the state. This agency averaged $2.44 for every dollar of local money, state and federal. That average has not changed. We've done a bit better in the last couple of years in getting grants, and we're going to continue our hardest to do even more. We have a national stimulus, we could do more. But Pedro, we're not going to solve our gap by relying on the federal and state. We're going to do better for sure, and we're going to try to do better. But I think the 2.44 is a number I would use in terms of how much I get for every local dollar I invest.
So I guess the obvious question, we need to do something to go out and get additional funds.
Absolutely. There is no, I will tell you, and just we said we're going to have frank discussion. If this region doesn't get additional fund, I mean, the world won't end, but you can build absolutely nothing. Not the one we put in the list in 2004, and not the one we have in this plan. As far as I'm concerned, San Diego is going to be the final say or yay or nay, but unless you get additional funds locally, regardless of how much you get from federal and state, you're not going to build major projects, period.
And I think that, to me, that's the headline of all of this.
That's right.
Thank you, Hassan.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Orso. Mr. Hopper, how about you? And we'll go with you next, and then Mr. Hopper.
Thank you, Sunny. First, I'd like to say thank you to Michelle and Colleen and Ray. That was an excellent presentation and very informative for us. So we all appreciate that. And I agree with Pedro that the underlying layer of all of this is really, how are we going to get these additional funds? But some things, I guess I have two questions. One for you, Ray, and I see Jim Linthicum's on this call or listening in as well. And he and I both sit on the chamber housing and land use meetings. And I thought it was interesting in the forecast for housing that there's now, you know, the forecast has gone down quite a bit for needed housing. I'd be curious to know, for that forecasted housing requirement, what the delta is between what we actually have and what's the new forecast is. And sitting on the chamber meetings, you know, the developers are saying that it's very difficult to build these houses that are needed. And so with this new regional plan, how are we gonna make that sea change to work with like the chamber and other agencies to convince and enable the development to happen around the mobility hubs or the corridors, when the original plan was to expand out into the open spaces? I see that as a difficult sell with that group.
So in terms of the forecast, we're probably looking at roughly 200,000 additional housing units that need to be built. That number in this particular forecast that you were looking at includes the RENA allocation, or the RENA numbers that were provided to us by the state of California. Oh, sorry. Sorry, they include the RENA numbers that were there. It also includes a slightly smaller household size due to the fact that the population is aging, and therefore you have fewer people per household in the future. There's the demographic forecasts have changed significantly. So that's what we have in terms of the forecast. In terms of where we put the housing units, a lot of that has to do with the jurisdictions and their zoning and the ability to build denser within the urban areas. We're working actively with the cities right now when we talk about these mobility hubs. We were just visiting with Mayor McNamara up in Escondido and talking to him about what that might look like in his area, where we could densify housing around future transportation that we would be bringing into the areas. So it's a collaborative effort between Sandag and the cities to really make this happen in the future. But we need to re-envision the region in terms of land use if we expect to be able to meet our state and federal mandates, especially the state goals as it relates to VMT and GHG reduction.
And that's, thank you, Ray.
And just to add to
add on?
Just to be clear, or obviously Sandag does not have a land use authority, but we have a desire and we have the funding to work with cities to accomplish densification around transit station. And let me just be very clear. Right now, and Jim Linthicum would agree, if we just built 9 beautiful stations for the Mid-Coast. But what are they is just parking lots. Is that how we want the future to be? I believe most of these stations are in the city of San Diego. I believe the city of San Diego is willing and ready with the leadership of Mayor Gloria. I think we're gonna make these mobility hubs places where not only we build housing, but it becomes a livable place. We're thinking about the central mobility hub with the Navy. I mean, we're building thousands of housing. So while we don't have land use authorities, we have the funding and the know-how how to figure out a way to do it in such a responsible way. That doesn't mean that we want to dictate where people should live, whether it's multifamily or single family. We want to provide choices. And those choices, I believe, transportation without land use is not going to work. Transportation and land use will work much better together, but that doesn't mean we're going to dictate where people live and how they build. But I believe we have an opportunity with this 5 big moves, a great opportunity for the cities and the region to work together to provide the kind of housing that we so desperately need right now.
Honey, could I do one more? So this one would be for you, Colleen, and you talked quite a bit about the, our new mandates, especially with the VMT. And I was curious, given our coming out of the last year of COVID, and so many firms and people are talking about an augmented work schedule where I think there's going to be quite a bit of work from home. And are you including that in the forecast, like this new work environment that we have as far as the requirements that we'll have for the VMT?
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Hopper, for that great question. We've made pretty aggressive assumptions about telecommuting in the plan. So that's in place. I think something that is really important for us to be thinking about is when you look at the entire workforce, it's only about 30% of the workforce that really can telecommute. And based on the surveys that we're doing of employers are wanting their employees to come back to work. And obviously, there's lots of discussion going on now about how many days a week of telecommuting and all of that. But we know that there are still the essential workers that need to get to and from job centers and schools and all of that. And the other thing that we found as well, that even when employees are telecommuting, they're still making lots of trips during the day. So maybe when they would have been in an office all day long, during the day, they're leaving to maybe go to the market or run some sort of quick errand. And so the traffic is not necessarily going away, but we have made fairly aggressive assumptions about the number of people that will be telecommuting by the year 2035 and then after that as well.
So if I may, Mr. Harper, and the jury's still out. I mean, there's not conclusive data, but the data that we have so far says that on average, people who telecommute make more vehicle mile travel than those who do not. And that's unfortunate because I remember in the 80s and 90s, we used to say, oh my God, when we discovered the fax machine, nobody's going to travel anymore. And unfortunately, the data is, you eliminate the commute trip, but you do so many other trips that you used to do on the way to work and the way from work. Having said that, I think telecommuting is good for congestion relief. So when you telecommute, you're not out there in the peak hours in the morning between 6 and 9 and not there between 3 and 8 in the evening. That's a good thing. But is it reducing greenhouse gas emission in VMT? The jury's still out, but most likely it's the opposite, the other direction. So like Colleen said, we're making all the assumption that we could justify by data. We'll continue to do it, but whether that yields a benefit or not, we don't know when it comes to measuring the vehicle mile travel reduction. And by the way, we have a program, we encourage employers to give their employees flexibility for whatever reasons they want to do it. And like Colleen said, that applies to the 30%. But unfortunately, the data is not very supportive of vehicle mile travel reduction.
Thank you, Mr. Krata. Anything else, Mr. Hopper?
Oh, thank you, Vice Chair.
Okay. I see Mr. Chair Kenny is back, but I don't see you on camera and you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I'd like to speak. Well, first off, that was an excellent presentation. It was a very inopportune time for my video feed to cut out. I apologize for that. And I don't know what's going on, but Sonny, if you could just continue with the meeting today, because I don't know if I get booted again, I don't want to interrupt the meeting. But I have some questions, so when Stuart's done, call on me.
Okay, Mr. Halpern.
Thank you, Sunny. I just have two questions, one for our CEO and then one maybe it's for Colleen or Ray. But first, Hassan, I very much appreciate your comments about accountability and oversight. And I'd like to drill down on that just for a little bit. I'm wondering if for sake of the public's confidence in prospectively approving this 163 or whatever billion-dollar plan, you would say that you're committed to best practices of accountability and oversight for the agency, and if there are potentially reasonable enhancements relating to ITOC or other oversight entities that might be suggested, that you would welcome those as part of making sure that the public has total confidence in the agency going forward.
Mr. Halpern, absolutely. I want to be totally clear that I commit to this 100%, 200%. And I challenge you to carry this to every time you feel otherwise, you call on us. I have an amazing team here, and we made it clear together that accountability and credibility of this agency hinges on us being absolutely and feeling and acting and behaving accountable. Furthermore, we have, which we didn't have before, an independent auditor here. Her office is free to go anywhere in the agency. I happen to like her and what she's doing. I like the fact that she's independent. She can talk to anybody, see anybody, and I made it very clear to everyone here that everything is on the table. Nothing is under the table, and if there's something wrong, I want to know about it. So you have my commitment to that. As long as I'm here, accountability is the #1 priority for this agency, giving some of the stuff that I'm not proud of, but I take full responsibility for. So yes, sir, 100% commitment.
Great, thank you. Very important to hear that from you.
Can I add something to that too, if you don't mind? I think that going even beyond what Hassan said, in the work that we've done on this regional plan, we've worked harder than ever to be as transparent as possible and making all the background data, everything available. I think Ray has even mentioned the terabytes of data that are available on our website, and essentially anything anybody's asked for and how we've made the decisions and how we've put together the plan, we've made available. And that has really been all about the accountability, because we think it's so important for the taxpayers of this region to know how much we care and how important it is to us to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. So I just want to say that, from the person sort of leading this overall effort, that has been a foundation for how we've approached our work.
And just to Colleen's point, there is no, a basement room that's close to staff doing. We're open to the public. We opened the Vision Lab for the public to come and see what we do, why we do what we did. Why did we propose 2 high occupancy vehicle lanes of the 78 as opposed to the original plan? I think you would agree with me that Ray Major, especially during the pandemic, he was the spokesperson for this region and nationally and statewide, just simply because we perfected the idea that if you wanna have decision driven by data, you have to live up to making sure the data is there for anybody to review, not only peer review, but for the public to see. And so if somebody asks and says, what kind of modeling you did? We're not only gonna show you and send you the data, we're gonna actually tell you, come and see how we do it. This is how transparent we wanna be and how accountable we wanna be.
Well, thank you again. Really appreciate that commitment. If I could just one other, and I'm not sure if this is Ray or Colleen or both of you, feel free to jump in. But there's no question in my mind, at least, that evolving the new RTP to the new realities makes total sense, as will amending the existing ordinance. And I think you guys have done a fabulous job, not just in this presentation, but in many others I've seen, in communicating very complex plan, and the approach behind the plan, all that has been fabulous. I think though, for a lot of the public, the bottom line is likely to be, how is this going to affect me? And I'm wondering if you will at some point have information for members of the public to be able to say that, for example, if I'm in major population center X, what will be my travel time? What's my travel time currently to major job center Y? And what will it be once the new plan has been implemented? Because again, I think for a lot of people, that's really going to be their bottom line, is trying to understand, how is this going to change my life? Particularly, the difference between people who have cars and people who don't have cars, or people who have cars who may actually like the idea of taking transit if it's actually going to improve their commute time. So following on the data-driven approach, I'm wondering if that kind of data is something that will be available to people.
Yeah, and let me start and then I'll let Ray jump in. So Mr. Halpern, you've been such a good student of the work that we've been doing here. And I think our focus over the last several months has really been to explain the process, explain the how we did this and what it is. And as we're moving now toward, I feel like we've done a lot of explaining. Now we need to talk about why. Why is this important to you if you live here or there? And what does this mean for you? And that is something we're working on very closely right now with our leadership and our communications team, because we want the residents of the region to know, why should they care about this? And how can this really impact their lives? There are lots and lots of performance measures that we've laid out in the appendices of the plan. And those are things that now we need to draw out and explain exactly what you're saying. If I live here, what does this mean for me or my family, my commute, my life, all of that. And those are really important aspects as we move forward. And we welcome input from all of you and how we shape that. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Ray.
Sure. And the short answer to your question is yes, that data it's being calculated right now. We're working on it. If you think about the data-driven approach that we used in this particular plan, there's multiple phases. The first thing we did is we collected data to really understand how people move around the region. And so that was one type of data that helped us define what this new infrastructure should look like, what the new system would be. And then once the system was determined by our planning department, those numbers then go into a model where we start to calculate what is the impact of all of these changes that are being proposed, these 10,000 new connections between these multiple layers. So we do all the math to understand what the impact is there. And then once we have that, the next thing we can do is to start to calculate, and how does that compare to what we would have had we not done anything, or with the old plan, et cetera. So that's the phase that we're in now that we're looking at. So the first phase was to understand what is the impact of the current system and as it's proposed. And we're moving now towards understanding what the differences are. And we'll be sharing that data, as Colleen said, as we start talking about the why. And that's probably in the September timeframe that we'll be ready with that type of information.
And let me just, Mr. Halpern, so obviously your question is a great one. So if you live in San Marcos, and if you're a commuter and you're gonna say why this plan is better than the original thinking. And obviously we're gonna tell you that you have choices and travel time, but let me also make sure that we're not raising expectation for something we can't accomplish. We're just starting this big data, the internet of everything. This is an endeavor that's going to take tens of millions of dollars to perfect. Going to require us to collect our own data and using our national data to access all public information data and private sector. So I would say, to be fair to Ray and his team, the two of them or three of them, we need time and we need resources to get to the place where we actually instantly could do it through an app to get information. I want San Diegans to be able to go to an app and get the right information about their travel choices, travel time, what they benefit or not. We're not there yet. So While Colleen and Ray is doing their best to put as much information, credible information as possible, there will be a lot to be desired, a lot missing in this plan. Hopefully by the time the next plan rolls around, update, I think things will be much better.
Great, thank you.
So before we go to Mr. Kinney, I just want to acknowledge that we have hands raised also by Mr. Fuller, Mr. Frankel, and Ms. Orso. So we will take them in that order. Chair Kinney, go ahead.
Mute myself, throw on the video and hope for the best. A couple of questions. It seems like the managed lanes as a substitution for general purpose lanes is just being equated as a 1-for-1, and I'm a bit concerned about that. You can't put a zipper down the 56. It's got bridges that are 300 feet apart. So things like that, you'll work that out in the future, correct? So you won't have to worry about those types of things. But so when would you get to some kind of advanced planning, advanced engineering where you would have some data on whether or not those things are feasible? Like the I-8, 4 managed lanes on the I-8. You don't have any shoulders on the I-8. So
that's a great question, Chair. And also, when we get the detail, obviously, the plan is a first step. I think Member Orso, rightly so, said, well, you're going to have to get some funding for this plan. If San Diego say yeah to this plan, and they're willing to fund it, the next step will be immediately after the adoption of this plan, December, to start environmental and design work on all of these projects. And during that process, you would learn much more than you know now. We're right now at a higher level because it's the plan level, it's a regional plan. Once you get into project specific, you're gonna, as your vice chair know, and she's been in this business, project specific, this is when you learn all the challenges and the opportunities. But I do want to address your point about managed lanes. First of all, let me just make it clear. All the proposed managed lane are done within the existing right-of-way. We're not taking land anywhere. We're taking shoulders. And in some cases, we actually converting lanes in existing to managed lane and combining it with the shoulders. We have the data to say that by doing that, you're actually adding capacity to the system based on the analysis we're doing. And I would argue that's adding capacity to the system that's managed, dynamically managed, is much better than adding a lane and 3 months later filling it up and wondering what you're gonna do. I will tell you this, I work in this business for, I will admit, over 30 years. And I was in LA for most of them. And since I started my career, we were thinking, what we're gonna do to the 405? I think, Sonny, you remember the 405, right? Let's add a lane here. Let's do the interchange here, bridge here. What's the most congested freeway in Los Angeles right now? Is the 405. And we're still saying, let us add, now they're adding a high occupancy toll lane. Their metro is looking at the support without passing a monorail. My point is, you can't just keep adding lanes and think things are gonna disappear. People love to drive. Transit ridership went down all over the country in Southern California. So Chair Kenny, I think your question is a great one. I can't definitely tell you a lot of the details until we start the environmental and design for these projects, but I can tell you that this managed lane system, by either using shoulders or combining it, the data show that it's gonna be better for capacity overall.
well, thank you for that response. Yeah, I think managed lanes certainly have their place. And where they fit, we should probably build those instead of general purpose lanes. Your second question, I would certainly appreciate the argument between VMT and LOS. I guess that ship has sailed and we're all in the VMT business. Along this, at the same timeline, was the development of Vision Zero and accident reduction as a major goal. It's become quite the topic in the transportation industry in the last 5 years, and I didn't hear anything about that. Is there a place in there for Vision Zero projects?
Yes, yes, there is, Chair Kenny, and I apologize, that isn't something that I mentioned, but we have, with the plan, assumed a Vision Zero policy. And when we talk about the active transportation investments, that's all about Vision Zero, making the investments so that bicyclists and pedestrians are in areas that are completely separated from vehicular traffic. So safety is a core goal of the plan, and Vision Zero as well. So thanks for bringing that up.
We've often talked about how we account for those projects. We build them, but we don't have a separate accounting for them. So if we were going to revamp our project list and maybe our project accounting, we could have some Vision Zero program to keep track of those. And honestly, some of those rural freeways, yeah, okay, we're not going to widen those anymore, but some of them have challenges other than capacity that probably still deserve some type of project to correct.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
Okay. All right. This is more of a technical thing, but in the past, there was a project on the 805 that we substituted for purchasing the toll road. This was a while ago. And when we did that, ITALC went and hired an attorney and got an opinion out of the attorney of whether or not we could do that. And I brought that issue up of doing that again for this, but maybe if you could ask council, was that opinion, did it cover this type of project substitution as well? Can we, I'm sorry, this is not for the planning director, but anybody out there who
Yeah, I know, it's for John Kirk. I see John Kirk is here, so he's turning on his camera.
Ma'am, and I don't have that opinion in front of me, but that's certainly something we can look back at, take a look at what the scope of that opinion was, and report back about whether or not this is within that scope.
Yeah, that to me, if an independent oversight committee who in the past had gone and got a separate legal opinion on project substitution or project modification, there's a precedent for us to do it. I don't want to collect opinion, so find out if that opinion that we got several years ago would be something we could rely on to say, hey, we've looked at this type of situation before as an independent committee, and we support what they're doing based on our own opinions. And that might lend a little weight to what we're doing here. So
certainly do that.
Thank you. And my last question, and I'll pass the baton, but you mentioned new rail down in Chula Vista and in the 805. Where's that going to go?
So right now we're looking at an alignment close to the 805, but hitting the major, dense areas. And it goes from the border all the way up Chula Vista, and then it eventually connects goes City Heights, and then connects into Kearney Mesa and over to Sereno Valley. So that's the purple line that you may be familiar with.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't aware of any additional rail getting south of the city of San Diego, but that's exciting.
It is. So the purple line goes essentially from the border, hitting the major population centers, and then to our major job centers, and then connects up with the mid-coast trolley.
All right. Well, I think Pedro hit the nail on the head there. Now we have to pay for all these things, so we're all interested to see how that phase of the project is described as well. So thank you very much for your presentation and answering my questions. It's an exciting time. With that, Sunny, if you could continue.
Chair Kenny. Okay, Mr. Fuller, you're up next. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. I really want to say it was a great presentation. I thoroughly agree that this needs to happen. My questions relate more to the environmental impact report. I note that it's going to be coming out summer 2020. Just wondering if you could remind us of that timeline, when to expect it. Really interested in seeing how the sustainable communities, the VMT, greenhouse gas, all that stuff, what the impacts actually are. And a question about environmental justice. Will that be addressed through the EIR? Will there be a separate, I'm just curious how that'll be addressed. And then one other question as it relates to coastal permitting. How do you envision that to happen, similar to the North Coast Corridor, or project by project, depending on where it's located? Those are my questions. I'll be quiet and for answers.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. So the EIR will come out at the end of August, and we are following CEQA to the, absolute nth degree. So that's where you will see that, the additional greenhouse gas analysis, the vehicle miles traveled analysis. We do a social equity analysis. One of the things that we're doing with the plan, and then it's also part of the CEQA analysis, is looking at the areas of the region that have poorer air quality than others, and how are we mitigating for that? And that really comes down to the kinds of transportation investments that are being made so that we're cleaning up the air. So that piece. And then what was your last question? Darn it, I have three. What was the third one?
And it's okay. Let me just elaborate on the EIR. I think that our hope, environmental impact report, that when we do a regional environmental impact, you would like to be able to actually use it for a project later, but it is still a regional impact report. And as you know, we have actually in San Diego twice gotten CEQA streamlining and reform by doing bills in Sacramento, which never happened in the state of California. The first time when we delayed the plan, they gave us a relief in CEQA. And the second time we did the bill 2731 for the Central Mobility Hub to streamline CEQA. So we take this seriously. We have good experience with this, but I think the EIR is a place where actually an opportunity for the public also to get more detail about what we're doing. So you can answer.
Okay, now that I remember that, well, not remember, people help me remember what the third question was, which was about the coastal permitting. And that happens more when we get into the detail on the project level. And so I think it's important to recognize this is a program level environmental document. This plan is really a blueprint. And as Hassan said, further studies are required to actually get to the place that there will be an exact station here, or exactly what this, improvement will look like happens at the detailed level and the subsequent CEQA analysis. But it's this level of CEQA analysis that allows us to streamline, say, the greenhouse gas analysis for future projects. Does that answer your?
Yeah, fully understand this to be a programmatic level EIR. My hope was that there would be some sort of long-range development plan or some equivalent that the Coastal Commission could approve concurrently and kind of help streamline that process, but that's out of your hands.
I think it's fair to say, and Jim Lithicum knows this, the executive director of the Coastal Commission, Jack Ainsworth, is a good man that we met with. He actually, him and his staff and us meet regularly, almost monthly, because like you mentioned rightly so, not only the North Coast Corridor, but we have coming up the Los Angeles Corridor, a lot of work there. We're doing the studies right now. So we're going to work well with the Coastal Commission to make sure whatever processes we take are streamlined, so we don't have to wait a couple of years to do anything. So we're going to deploy a system approach with the Coastal Commission, and I appreciate Jack and his willingness to be cooperative with us.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate the answers.
Very good. Mr. Frankel, you're up next.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair House and to staff. It was an excellent presentation. Thank you for all your work. I think it's a very exciting vision for the region. A couple of my colleagues have mentioned the kind of pay for, and I just want to make sure, and for the public and for myself, that I understand the future sources of local revenues that we're anticipating. But before that, I think just overall to the director, as we sit here today, what is your level of confidence that the projects included in this plan can be implemented, are constructible, and will ultimately be delivered?
Thank you, Mr. Frankel. And this is really a question that in San Diego means more than probably in LA or somewhere else. I have 100% confidence that every project we propose in this plan is constructible if you have the resources. I have 100% confidence that the reimagining of future transportation in San Diego through the 5 big moves will be good for San Diegans. At least the data show us that. I am confident that if San Diegans say yay to local funding, that by 2035, they're gonna see a system that they're gonna be proud of for generations to come. I couldn't be more confident. I can tell you one of the reasons I maybe talked to you before about this. When I started, the first thing we did, first major activity we did is we went to the state and we said, we cannot meet your deadline. We need 2-year break. And so they laid the plan for 2 years. We got a bill passed and signed by the governor. The reason we did that is we really want to make sure I can answer your question you just asked. We didn't want to just, we could have just dusted the old plan and made a couple of changes and said, here we go. But that wouldn't be fair to San Diego. So I am 100% confident that everything we're talking about in terms of high occupancy toll lanes, the transit leap, the mobility hubs is constructible. Obviously that if San Diegans say nay, and you don't have the local funding, we'll have challenges.
Thank you. I think that's a great segue into the local revenue sources. And so it seems like there's about 100 billion in new revenue that we're anticipating in the plan. And of that, the majority is road user charges. There will be a regional road user charge as well as a state implemented road user charge anticipated to begin in around 2026. And so I think the total is about 4 cents or so per mile. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So by 2030, first of all, let me just address, and yesterday I was actually meeting with the chair of the road user charge at the state level, who's a member of the California Transportation Commission, Mr. Joe Liu. And I think the state, if they were to meet the electric vehicle mandates that the executive order, remember the governor has an executive order said by 2035, I believe we're gonna phase out fossil fuel. Then the next question is, if you don't replace the gas tax with some form of user base, you'll have zero revenues. And not only you don't have money to build anything, but you don't have money to maintain the system we have. And you would agree that economically speaking, we have to maintain the system and keep it working. So I have no doubt whatsoever that some form of a user charge will be implemented in the state of California before 2035. What we're assuming in the plan is that happens, and that's revenue neutral. You're just replacing the gas tax with user. In addition, we're assuming another 2 cents of local charge that will bring local revenues, in addition to what the state is assuming. So you're right, we are assuming total 4 cents per vehicle mile travel. Now, I don't want to minimize this and say, oh, this is nothing, or it is significant charge. But frankly, if you compare that, let us say that on average, with this 4 cents, if you drive 12,000 miles a year, this is about maybe $100 to $150 a year for a commuter, for San Diego. That's a significant money, but at the same time, if you think about what you get for that $150, I think most San Diegans, like they did 4 times in LA, they're gonna say, yeah, we're paying for it, because there is cost-benefit ratios. Most plans will tell you a cost-benefit ratio 1-to-1 is good enough. In some cases, I could argue that the cost-benefit ratio is 10-to-1. Therefore, yes, we are assuming 4 cents total, 2 to replace the gas tax at the state level, 2 additional local charges to get the revenues to build this system. So you got it right in the plan.
And so in addition to the road user charge, we're also assuming a 0.5 cent MTS measure and a 0.5 cent Sandag measure, correct?
We're assuming that, I mean, it doesn't have to be MTS and Sandag, it can be one measure, but it's a total of 1 cent. And let me tell you, right now, the existing measure, TransNet, generates about 320 million a year, somewhere between, right? Between 300 and 320 million a year. A 1 cent, assuming nothing changes, will generate another 600-700 million a year. Combined with the existing one, which expires in 2048, I think that's enough local revenues to get the federal and state matches with the user to build the system, to build the plan of 166 billion. So yes, we're assuming a 1 cent between MTS and Sandag measure. Again, this is up to Sandiego at the end of the day, but that's the assumption in the plan. And we want to be upfront about this. We can't do what we did in the past. We just make you feel good and say, well, we get half a cent, we'll do everything. No, we're telling you this is what it's going to take to build a plan. And it's up to you, Sandiego, whether you want to say yeah or nay. This is not my decision at the end of the day. This is the decision of the people here. And we can, showing data like to the questions earlier, we can show the data that says it's good for Sandiego. I can look everyone in the eye and say, it's really worth the investment. Like we did in LA 4 times. And they did in Riverside once, and they did in Orange County once, and San Bernardino once. I think people, if you could be honest, accountable, like Mr. Halbin was mentioned, and you look them in the eye and you tell them the honest truth, I think people will pay for infrastructure. That was proven to be the case in many, many areas in the state.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great point on the cost benefit analysis. And I think it was Mr. Halpern who inquired about the travel time. And I think as compared to the aggregate costs we're talking about, I do think most San Diegans will find it to be a worthwhile investment. So thank you very much for your presentation.
If you don't get the benefits that we're talking about, you can blame Ray and Colleen. I would have absolutely nothing to do. But
thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we're down to Mr. Orso, and then I have a couple of questions myself. Go ahead, Mr. Orso.
Thank you, Sonny. The first is a question for Mr. Kenny. You were asking for a legal opinion, and I'm not sure that I understood if it was just specific to the 125, or was it specific to the overall proposed plan? Because I asked on the specific overall plan, and basically what Hassan stated, which is what I remembered, that in order to change the projects, it needed to have a 2/3 vote from the board to be able to do that. So I don't know that you need a legal opinion on that when it was written in the ordinance. But that's why I was trying to figure out what was your question.
Sure. So I believe it was 8 years ago. It might be more than that. There was a proposal to eliminate the I think they were HOV lanes, or maybe they were bus lane, BRT lanes on the 805, which was a project that was on the books for TransNet, and substitute the purchase of the toll road. Because it would provide an equivalent benefit, and if it penciled, then there was an opportunity to say do that project instantaneously. You just bought the toll road, and the project was built for you, and so there was a benefit in, say, overall time to providing some additional capacity for the South Bay residents. So it looked like a good deal. The company that was managing the toll at the time was struggling. So that was proposed. We're going to eliminate this project, and we're going to go ahead and substitute it in this other project. And that was news at the time that hadn't been done before. The ITOC has funds set aside to do their own investigations. And usually we spend that money on audits. But in that case, since there was something that had been proposed that was new to ITOC, and as far as I know, hadn't been done before with the TransNet ordinance project list, we went and hired an attorney, and he came back and he said that. He said, yeah, you can do this. And he probably, I don't recall it being very profound. I think it was a one-letter opinion that said, yeah, your ordinance is written in a way that allows you to do these things.
And we did change the ordinance, Mr. Orso, just so you know, the board did change the ordinance with 2/3 vote. John Kirk is here, our chief counsel, can correct me, but nothing that would change the ordinance will be short of going to the board and getting the 2/3 votes, regardless of the legal opinions, right, John?
That is correct. It was Commission Ordinance 12-01 back at the time, it was March 23rd, 2012, that substituted out the 805 lanes for the 125. So there may have been a legal opinion related to something involving that, but specifically what you're speaking of now, that was done with a formal amendment to the ordinance.
Yeah. So Pedro, there's no requirement to do it, but as an independent group who's provided funds by Sandag to do this type of additional investigation, we could. And if we've already done it and we have an opinion that's independent of everything else that's going on that says it's something that's allowable, we want to lean on that again. We've done this kind of thing in the past.
To that point, Chair Kenny and to Mr. Orso, we're still having funds available for you if you feel you want further discussion, legal or otherwise. So we're still available to you if that's the route you want to choose. But we've done it in the past. We changed ordinance. Well, I'm actually about to go to the board in September and ask for ordinance change. And then eventually, by the time we adopt the plan, we're going to do what Mr. also alluded to. That's a major ordinance change come January.
Got it.
Does that answer the question, Pedro?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Michael. And my other question is more of a statement than a question in some ways. Back in 2004, one of the things that the ordinance had for the plan is we ended up building this very robust system of tracking the projects and tracking TransNet and having these dashboards and gas gauges so that the public could see what was going on. And it was a great system at the time. I think one of the things that for me, that system fell short, or it feels today that it fell short, is that it didn't have what I would call kind of like a risk register for the program in and of itself, where you could look at the projects, but how they connect with the program and say, okay, if I add this to this project, it's going to take away some money from the program. And what am I going to do in the program level so that I can continue financing everything? And I think to me, that would be something that would be very important to have as we move forward, Hassan.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Mr. Orso. I think first of all, I think Michelle showed you the 650 project that we built with TransNet. And frankly, I wish we were able to show it to you today, but we'll show you later. We will make sure that the graphics tell the story. I mean, there is a great deal of accomplishment for TransNet that you should be proud of in terms of PAD. I also agree with you that we should, when we go ask for an ordinance change, we should actually tell people what we're changing and how that's impacting the overall system and what other things instead and why we're doing it. We're not just doing it because for the sake of doing it. So I think a dashboard idea is a great one where, when you see Caltrans sign, when you drive on the highways, there should be similar things where you say, here what you're getting, here what your dollars is getting you. Unfortunately, and this is unfortunate, and this is something we have to deal with, that the original estimates for what we're going to get for TransNet was too high for us to even able come close. It's unfortunate, but that's the way life is. And it's never too late to come and admit I take full responsibility for anything that went wrong in that. But moving forward, I promise you we're going to be as transparent as humanly possible, and we're going to do exactly what you're suggesting, Mr. Orso, and that is when we make changes, tell people why we're making these changes and let them decide whether this is good or bad.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have just a couple of questions myself. If you could just confirm, are there any corridors in TransNet that are either done or not addressed in the 5 big moves? Have we covered everything with the proposed project?
They're all addressed. They're all addressed.
I want to make sure the public knows. Okay, and we've had some tidbits of what's going to happen next. I know that this item was brought to us for discussion only. There's no action at this point, but I would like to know kind of the whole process, what's going to happen until the TransNet amendment, Hassan. So
Thank you very much, Vice Chair, and this is really an important question. So right now, as you know, the plan is out for public review until August 6th. Once we get the comments, we'll respond to the comments. We'll start the environmental impact report, and that has its own process, 45 days. We're gonna most likely start a discussion with the board about some changes, not necessarily the major changes in the plan, but some changes like the bike program. As you know, the bike program is not part of the major corridors right now, and it's limited its funding to 2%. Unfortunately, this is not gonna change even the projects we started. So we're gonna start talking to the board about some changes. When we adopt the plan on December 9th, and if the board says yay to the plan, we're obviously gonna submit it to the federal state governments, and we're gonna get them to approve it. That's important to continue the fund flowing from federal and state. Once that's done, 60 days after, I think the state has 60 days to approve it. Once that's done, we're actually gonna go to the board with major ordinance change to reflect the 5 big moves as opposed to the 2004. So there will be minor discussion between now and the adoption of the plan. A major discussion will start sometimes January, February of next year. And that will end up with a major ordinance change, like you alluded to, that says, here are now the projects that cannot be moving forward. Here are the projects that's gonna move forward. Between now and then, I'm sure we're gonna be speaking to you some more as an oversight committee, especially on the steps in between, like the changes we're doing to the bike program, et cetera. One other thing that we're probably gonna be talking to the board, and we're still figuring out the funding source. You know, we adopted an equity statement. A statement is worth nothing unless you follow it with actions. And those actions require funding. And that funding is gonna have to come from somewhere. We are looking at pilots right now, maybe $8 to $10 million of pilot, like looking at youth passes, looking at 24-hour service in some areas, looking at maybe installing some bathroom facilities in some areas. We're gonna pilot those. We still, I think Jim Rithicum and Ray Traynor are here. We're looking at funding source. I don't think it's from TransNet, but if that requires us to go there, we will come to you and talk to you first. But so to answer your question directly, minor discussion between now and the adoption of the plan, major discussion after the approval of the regional plan, right, Ray? Sometimes in January, February.
That's correct, Hassan.
thank you so much. Okay. Are any other comments from the members of iTalk? Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you, Mr. Krata and Sandak staff. This was an excellent presentation, very informative. I love the side-by-side map. It was very helpful to see what was TransNet versus what's 5 big moves. And I know that you have a couple of outreach meetings, public meetings coming up as well. And I encourage the members of iTalk to attend that as well. I plan to do so we can get more informed and be ready for decisions and approval or basically additional discussions. So with that, are there any other?
Vice Chair,
To,
if I may, and I appreciate you and your colleagues attending this meeting. And these meetings, we're required to do them and we're gonna check the box. But I also want to alert you that we are looking and right now contemplating a major event in San Diego where we don't reach just hundreds or 1,000 that attend the meeting, but tens of thousands of people. Our communication team are thinking, how do we reach more San Diegans? To be Mr. Halbern's point, to be upfront, to say, here it is, here's what we're proposing, here what we're proposing. I don't know whether that's gonna be next month or the month after. This also depends on what event. So I encourage you to be there. And I also wanna thank you for accommodating this special meetings. You could have said we're busy, but you didn't. And so we're very grateful. I'm very grateful. My team is very grateful. And I want to conclude this by saying, when I said the best planning director and the best chief economist, and I really mean that. We have a great team here that my job was in the 2 years past to cheerlead them, and they're doing amazing work. They're really showing me a few things that I'm learning. So I thank you for accommodating this. Thank you for the questions and the discussion. I look forward to further discussions with you.
And thank you for your patience in answering all of our questions. Okay, the next item on the agenda is our next meeting, which is next week. So we'll see you again shortly. And with that, if there's no other comments, I